I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And today we are having our Sci-fi Sunday. Beautiful Miss Safa Purnell.
How are you doing, everybody? I hope you're having a fantastic day, evening, morning, afternoon, time zone, wherever you are in the world, whether it is the summer solstice or the winter solstice. I want to say happy hello to everybody and welcome to Book 101 Review. I can't wait to get into our topics today.
Let's continue our sci-fi fantasy topic, Miss Burnell. Let's do recap of what we talked about last week. I forgot.
So we were discussing a lot about the difference between science fiction and fantasy, how certain things like technology versus magic are handled between the genres. And then there's this lovely thing called science fantasy, which is sort of a hybrid of the two, which you can kind of see. You'll have to listen in for our last Safa Sunday, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, basically everywhere you can get podcasts, including YouTube. So if you want to see our beautiful faces, then make sure you head over to Daniel Lucas's channel on YouTube and you could watch us as we go.
Yes, and I forgot to change our website. Please do listen for our movie 101 review episodes. Because we talk about Mr. Guy Ritchie's movie 101 review. Please do invite them, Miss Burnell, for our movie 101 review.
So, as well as being an author myself, being a cyberpunk and mythpunk author, I am also a lover of movies. I'm somebody who used to work in the film industry and then switched over to writing books because, reasons. I plan to make movies in the future again, and I got the awesome opportunity with Mr. Lucas here to talk about Guy Ritchie, who is one of my favorite directors, a little bit hit and miss every once in a while, but ultimately, I absolutely love a lot of his films, from Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels to Rock and Rolla to, King Arthur, which came out a few years ago. So if you want to know more about Guy Ritchie and why I find him completely fascinating when it comes from a comedy and violence perspective, please listen to Movie 101 Review.
Yes. And Ms. Bernal, let's continue our topic. And what challenges do sci-fi fantasy characters commonly face, and how these challenges shape their development in sci-fi world?
A lot of the time when it comes to science fiction specifically, you have challenges between humanity and technology. You have challenges between humanity and the alien. So a lot of pulp science fiction and things like that, especially in the earlier days, kind of, going forward into the 1920s through the 1950s and 60s and things like that, you started seeing a swing of, alien invasion stories and different things like that. And alien invasion stories became quite popular. And one of the reasons why that's potentially the case is it's the sort of inspection into colonization and inspection to what happens when you have somebody that is way more advanced coming upon people who may not be as advanced, technologically. And then you have various versions of that, whether it's all the way back to War of the Worlds, which the original radio drama caused a lot of tension in certain people because they didn't necessarily tell people it was a work of fiction. And there were people at the time who were like, oh my God, the aliens are invading. What do we do? And they had to be like, well, no, it's just a story. It's just a story. It's just a story. No. Please go back in your homes. Go back inside. Like, come back. Oh my gosh. And so they had to kind of be like, oh, whoops. Well, that was a fail. But hey, we're still talking about it now. So was it a fail? That's a question. So we get a lot of that kind of sense of, this alien presence, this alien people. And then what that means to us. What does it mean if we're not alone? What does it mean if, we're struggling against somebody who might have better weapons or better this or better that than us? What kind of part of humanity is that plucky little thing that's still going to keep on going? You also got, quite a bit of especially if you get into the cyberpunk, a little bit more of the gritty when it comes to science fiction. You have slightly more down and out kind of console cowboys, if you're using the phrase from Neuromancer by William Gibson, who is one of the titular people in the cyberpunk. And I'm not worthy. I, if you're listening, William Gibson, I would love to meet you. We both live in the same city. I would love to go out for coffee sometime.
Yeah.
But anyway, uh, it was William Gibson's books like Count Zero, basically the Sprawl trilogy, which is Neuromancer, Mona Lisa Overdrive, and Count Zero, that got me into cyberpunk in the first place. As a teenager, completely changed my life. I was like, I'm in Shakespeare and acting, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to be a punk. Ah! And I
Cyberpunk.
lived up to it. But you get a lot of that sort of down and out kind of plucky underdogs trying to figure things out, make it work, hack the system to take power away from massive corporations, which have the majority of control. And so you have that sense of this plucky underdog trying to take on this almost overwhelming force and having to kind of make things do and make things work and rebel. So you get those kinds of ideas in science fiction. And then you have more utopian science fiction like Star Trek back in the Gene Roddenberry era, where, humanity has usurped all those things. We've grown past, we've evolved past those, tiny struggles, and now we're exploring the universe and exploring it for all of its beauty and seeing how we can kind of coexist and come together. So you've got that sort of what would a utopia look like branch of science fiction as well. And I'm seeing that a little bit more too in something like solar punk, which is a little bit more, almost cli-fi. So, climate fantasy, that kind of thing. You're getting in solar punk, you're starting to get a little bit more of like, what would a utopia look like if we solve the problems that are going on in the world?
Definitely.
Mhm.
For sure. So, how do authors use sci-fi fantasy characters to explore themes of technology and its impact on society?
Ooh. Well, if you're me, you create an android named Lieben, and then you
Yes.
write an entire novel about her. Shouting out to Neon Lieben. That is the first of my cyberpunk series. And for me personally, when it came to sort of investigating technology and kind of making those decisions, it was through multiple different characters exploring the same thing. That object, that eventual person, that eventual sapience known as Lieben, was a commodity to the CEO, to the chairman of the board. It was a commodity that was going to give him power over the rest of the world, that was going to change the way security happened and kind of give him a global monopoly on information and economy and everything like that. For Dr. Karnak, the instigator of this project, this Lieben project, it was a chance to try and conquer death. He had lost, his son and his daughter-in-law, and was desperate to try and find a way to basically buy into the transhumanist idea that maybe someday we can upload our minds into a computer. Maybe he can invent a way that we don't really die, that some part of us lives on, and that it's tangible and we can communicate with it, and that we can be a guiding light to each other through that sort of uploaded genetic memory and all of that kind of thing. So for him, it was very different. It was almost a spiritual experience to create Lieben. And he viewed it as he's creating, this cogs and sprocket being with, fiber optics and wire and servos and the whole thing, and various matrices for the neural net, which you'd have to read the book to find out.
Yes.
And it was a form of creating life. Whereas later on, when we meet Demian, he's a hacker. He's a military veteran from the side that lost the Flag War, hiding out in London going, if I keep my head down, I might be able to make it through this alive. And then all of a sudden, Lieben ends up on his doorstep. And the first thing he can think about is, oh my God, this technology could either change or destroy the world. What do I do with this? Oh, she's looking at me. Oh, frick. she's looking at me. Uh-oh, what do I do with this? And for Demian, it was more of that raw, almost militaristic look at the potential power behind this technology. And he was looking at it a different way because he's had to fight, AI and drones and things like that in war before. And then he's confronted with Lieben right in his face. And what does he do about it? And how skeptical is he as he's continuing forward? And that is going to be continuing as one of the major pushes of the novel series in Totem. Neon Lieben, again, it came out in 2021, and the sequel, Emptiness at the Center, is coming out this at the end of the year. Kind of going towards winter, so winter 2025. But
Looking forward for that.
it's going to be great. I think you get the people that are more Luddite who are like, ew, technology is bad. You get the people who are like, technology is amazing, but I am going to put my blinders on and not think of the consequences of what I'm creating. And then you get the people like Demian who are like, I'm fascinated by technology. At the same time, I'm fucking scared. Pardon my language, but that's Demian. Like, he's like, he's the kind of guy that would be looking at the situation we're in right now with AI in our current society and going, where are the rules? We need rules. Where are the rules? We can't just, go out there and make whatever we want, because what happens if that goes places we don't actually expect? And he sees kind of that more alien nature to a being like Lieben. And I really, really like playing with this one figure who's right there in the middle, this one thing. And then everybody around that thing thinks something different about it. And you're able to kind of decide who do you align with? Who are you in this with? Oh my gosh. Are you on Lieben's side, or are you on the Conglom side? Or, what do we do with this? Is it a boon, or is it the death knell to society? I love playing with those kinds of things in science fiction, and I know a lot of other people do too. And you can view technology as anything from this passive bit of, well, we can teleport now so we don't have to travel, so you don't need cars anymore, so everyone just kind of walks everywhere, all the way to somebody that's bellowing in the night against nanobots that are going to erase humanity one cell at a time. So
Definitely. So, Miss Bernal, can you read some of your favorite chapter in Neon Liben?
ooh, yes, I can. Let me stall for time. uh,
Yes,
let me, you know what? I'm just going to grab. There we go. Open Neon Lieben. I'm going to read chapter 1. Okay, come on. Here we go. Now, this is actually, okay, this is a good plug to have in here. If you want to read chapter 1 of Neon Lieben, it is free to read on my Substack. My Substack is Usurper Kings, so usurperkings.substack.com. And you can absolutely read. I put on the first chapter or two of all my books on my Substack because I want you to know what you're in for. I want you to know what you're what you're looking for
reading.
when it comes to things like that. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to be surprised about my tone, because my tone is, I believe, awesome. Whereas other people might be, that's a little bit too intense for me. And that is totally okay, because I'd rather somebody walk into a novel like mine, understanding that it is both emotionally grounded and incredibly action forward, rather than them being like, well, I didn't know what to expect. So you can read the first chapter of all my books on my Substack. And here's chapter 1 of Neon Lieben. Bare feet padded along the gray shore of Iqaluit, British Columbia. All but the bravest locals were long indoors as raucous waves crashed across the reef. The tang of salt water made the monolith spit on the grass. He sniffed the air, feet pressed against the earth as if waiting for it to pitch and yaw. The disequilibrium of life on the sea sloshed at wrung ears. No wave or bend came to the solid ground, nor did he see the dim electric signs wobble in the storm. Storm warning. Please remain indoors. Call for emergency. Storm warning. The script played in sigils Adarastos lived in ignorance of, no context for surf shops, boba tea, and coffee cafes, neither the few vehicles on the street tethered to blue glowing stands with battery icons. Haven. Above all signs and ubiquitous scripts, a crown of fluctuant purple and pink neon light. The only recognizable thing in Adarastos' mind was the crown. The lights dimmed and flickered. Not even the modern machine that android Queen Lieben could keep the storm from battering the Pacific coast. Adarastos' body left a trail of seawater back to the Carolina Channel. Serene android neo-nurses bustled between patients and visitors. The neons remained immune to the tumult of humanity's raised voices in emotional conquests between hospital beds. Chitter-chat of the storm, would it close down the pass on Highway 4? Was as ignored as the wind. Vibrational whirs convalesced on his skin. From the vibration alone and the lack of petrol fumes, Adarastos knew the auxiliary was a solar and wind power battery backup generator. Precisely how he knew such confundities existed was as questionable as the symbols on the signs. As long as the thunder wind continued, this place would remain attached to the hymn electric. Bare feet slid on the linoleum floor, as unfamiliar as the beings who caterwauled within this strange nest. It seemed to grow from the Uklulit soil in a steel-beam forest, the foliage vast panes of storm-proof glass. Light strips stung his eyes. Blank white light rang the length of every corridor. He understood little of the languages the beings chittered, nor why they stopped to watch as his chest passed the tops of their heads. Adarastos knew nothing but the flow of heartbeats, which resounded like a cacophonous orchestra lacking syncopation. Neon stopped as he entered patient wards. Android senses riled and scanned, while metal and silicone bodies became statues dedicated to the new humanity loved and conquered. A world of the modern machine's design.
The world. Wow, bravo, Miss Bernal,
And
bravo.
thank you. I go on here in this chapter 1. It was really important for me to start with Adarastos, and in the 2155 is the year for this. And the next little bit is Adarastos walking up to this elderly woman dying in a hospital bed, and he doesn't understand what death is, so he heals her. And this idea that this, what we find out very quickly in chapter 1. So again, it's not a spoiler if it's in chapter 1. You can read it online. You can read my chapter 1 on my Substack. This genetically engineered super soldier sees humanity for the very first time. He's never seen a human before. This is an 8-foot tall monster person. Walks into a hospital and doesn't know what else to do, so just starts healing people. And it was that idea of taking this monster, this behemoth, this monolith, and putting him in a situation where he doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he knows that. He knows that this heartbeat isn't right. He knows that this wound is bad. He knows that this cancer is not supposed to be there. And so he does diagnostics and he heals. And that was the sort of beginning of Adarastos. And then we have the plucky, hilariously out of his depth, Max Allard, whom I love. He's a character that I absolutely love writing. He basically gets sent by the captain of his ship to go get Adarastos, like just bring him back. It's like, oh, well, I'm basically the utilities guy. Like, I'm just a plumber. Like, I don't understand why you're sending me. And the captain's like, well, isn't it obvious? You are the least threatening person on my ship. Please go bring this monster back. And it brings in that humor. It brings in, that sort of ultimately human kid. I say kid, he's like 21 years old by this point. In a way where then you get the sort of like Adarastos is this calm, silent, super soldier kind of guy. And then this really chatty 21-year-old who's like, hey, wait, if I go to a Haven, which is a hospital and a community center all in one, they have sandwiches and coffee and I didn't have breakfast. So, ooh, I can eat. Ooh, vegetables. Yay, I've been on a ship for 7 months. And you get that juxtaposition there, which I really like adding to my work. I really like making sure that you have those moments of gravitas. You have, Adarastos walking through a storm into a building for the first time and seeing humanity and everyone being in awe of this gigantic thing that's present. And then I also bring in that humor to dissipate some of that, like, whoa, energy. I really like playing with that. Again, a little bit like Guy Ritchie. I like playing with the humor in there too. So
Yes. Yes, for sure. So, Miss Berna, before we go on, let's shout out our listeners from China. I was surprised that China is listening to us. And according to our analytics, Miss Berna, like we have 145 countries listening to us. And in China, Shanxi, we got 57% audience share. Yunnan at 14. I don't know how to pronounce this one. Liaoning at 14 and Shanghai at 14. Thank you for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers, authors all over the world like Miss Safa Bernal. So, Miss Bernal, in what ways do magic systems influence the development and limitations of fantasy characters?
hopefully that lovely word limitations is present. We've all seen, worlds created, both in the gaming industry and then also in fantasy literature as well, and comic books, where it's like, okay, well, we have a limitation for a couple sand, now it's out the window, and so first things first, a good magic system will have limitations. Power for power's sake that can go all the way to the cosmic level. That's okay. I'll say it. It's boring. It's like Superman stopping a
Mm,
bank robbery. If they're just bank robbers who are humans with guns, there's no harm to anybody in the room. There's no harm to Superman. It's just like, oh, here we go again. Frank, get ready. I'm sending them your way. Like you're done. It's just like he's gonna stop every bullet. He's gonna save every baby. He's going to make sure everybody's bank account isn't touched, and the prisoners are going to go to prison. There's no danger there. In order for there to be danger, in order for there to be thrill, in order for there to be tension, there needs to be limits. So that first word is incredibly important, because if your characters can do any and everything, then what limits do they actually have? And if the only limit you have is their mental attitude, or well, this thing happened to their in their past and they were traumatized. Yes, trauma is something very serious. It is something that I'm seeing a lot of in literature, that it's sort of a, I don't want to say it this way, but there's a lot of narratives that deal with trauma in an incredibly wonderful and healthy way that it's just beautiful to see. And I encourage those authors to write from that very real place. There are other people who just put the label trauma on it and then think that they can do whatever they want. And so there need to be limitations in a good magic system. There also needs to be consistency, logic. Even if the logic is not our logic, because again, this is fantasy, so it doesn't have to be our logic. There still has to be a logic to it. Something in that universe has to have the consistency and the ability to be like, okay, this is how it works all the time. This is the standard. This is how it works. Yes, you can deviate from that once in a while. And you get this a lot with a lot of magic systems where it's like, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe you. How did you learn how to do that spell? How did you learn how to do that music? Oh, I don't know. It was just in me. It's something from, a hidden bloodline or wherever else. You get that kind of thing too. But in order to stray from the normal, you have to define the normal. And then the norm still has to be there the vast majority of the time. So you have that consistency, you have that normalcy. This is how magic works. A lot of magic systems tend to be, energy has to come from somewhere. And so if energy is coming from somewhere, then where are you taking that energy from? If you're lighting a fire, does that mean you are making the rest of the room cold? Because you're using all that heat to create the fire. Or if you are healing somebody, does that mean that the healer is taking those wounds upon themselves? Or does it mean that they are accessing some form of cosmic force, cosmic fount, in order to bring that healing energy from another dimension or from another place? But whatever you do with the magic system, you need to be consistent. You need to let it have its own logic. And whenever you do make an exception for the rule, it has to be a true exception. Don't define your magic system in 7 different ways over the course of a novel, because then nothing is consistent and no one knows what's special anymore. No one knows whether or not this is a big deal, or it's just, well, that's how it always works because you've done this 3 times before in the series. You've changed how magic works 4 times. So that consistency becomes very important. Consistency, logic, and limitations. And then figure out where your power comes from.
Yes. Consistency
Mhm.
in everything, people. Like our podcast, we do have consistency. And how sci-fi fantasy characters' moral and ethical dilemmas contribute.
Ooh. Okay, so back in the day, let's just start with that Pulp Fiction back in the day. You
Oh
got a
yes.
lot more of the guy in this shirt good, guy in this darker shirt bad, you know, clear definition of who is a hero, who is an enemy. The enemy is defeated in the end, or, defeated to come back again. And then the heroes always succeed. You had that very staunch line in the sand. This is good, this is bad. We started seeing a more relativistic approach with the rise of modernity. When I say modernity, I mean cultural modernity. I mean the modernist era. So you start seeing a little bit more of a relativistic look, a little bit more shades of gray in there. Maybe, especially after what happened during the Second World War and then going into the Cold War, we start seeing a lot more of this sort of like, well, he says he's a good guy, but what did he have to do to get there? Do the ends justify the means? Or are there some things that are universal to keep to, even if it means you might lose? So early science fiction and early fantasy, I would say, was a little bit more black and white when it comes to that kind of thing. And again, I'm not trying to be racial there. I'm not talking about, the skin tone of people. I'm talking about one side was the Sith and one side were the Jedi, and we used to know what that meant. Um, this is the knight in shining armor and this is the dragon. As time progressed in the last century and kind of coming into our modern day, we've really added ethical dilemmas being more about various forms of wholeness of person, various forms of relativistic need and desire, and the way that we look at goodness and evil changed. Is goodness this intrinsic thing? Is goodness this thing you're born with? Or is it, how you go about things? Is it what you do and how you do it? So I would say when it comes to a lot of fantasy characters, when it comes to a lot of science fiction characters, I mean, we had in epic fantasy, you get, things like Lord of the Rings. I mean, I defy the person to tell me that Aragorn is evil. He is the most good of good, 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 good. Samwise Gamgee is the biggest hero in the entire universe. Prove me wrong. But then you get into more of, say, sword and sorcery books. You get more into like Conan, and you get more into various expressions of sword and sorcery, which eventually led to more expressions of comic books and other things like that, and heroes. And it's no longer about what is good or evil for everyone. It's about that intimate moment. It's about the person themselves. It's a smaller scale story. It's more about whether or not this person is going to get vengeance or respect, or if this person is going to solve a problem or avenge a woe. And it's not about that global scale of good and evil anymore. A lot of people consider that kind of global scale of good and evil to be a little bit tired at this point, and they want to know more of the individual story. Well, for this person, for Conan, he's not in it for the world. He's in it for himself. He's in it to kind of express his own level of, well, I saved myself, and that's all that mattered. So I think, depending what era that you're writing in, I'd say that ethics will always be part of our fiction. I am personally somebody who believes that we write from a place which reflects our own morality. That doesn't mean that every character we write is our morality. Otherwise, villains would be very weird. I certainly did not write a villain that was my own moral choices when I was writing the villains in Neon Lieben or in Son of Abel. There's a particular villain in Son of Abel who I was like, how do I make the most deplorable person in the history of the world? Aha, I've got it. And that's not me. But that evil is defeated because my point was that we need to defeat that evil. So, although I think our own beliefs are reflected in our work, that's just part for the course. That's what happens. We are writing from our own subconscious. We are writing from ourselves. And so part of ourself will be in our work to varying degrees. I think in that way you can kind of gain a sense of potential morality with certain things where you wouldn't necessarily when, like, we talked on Movies 101 review last week about Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Tarantino movies. I mean, Tarantino is not making any commentary on morality in his films. He's just writing something fun for himself and others. But characters, I think, are more expressive of an individual morality nowadays. I think there is a swing of trying to find a sort of communal morality that we can claim, but it's always going to be different because people are writing from a different place. And I think that's one thing when it comes to fantasy, especially, we are in such a better place now than we were even, 20 years ago when it comes to fantasy, because we are being blessed with so many more voices from so many more cultures, not one specific dominant culture, but from cultures all over the world. And that is a beautiful thing. And I'm here for it. And I want to see those stories. I want to see those diverse authors getting their due and having their stories out there. Like, I am for it. Absolutely. And with that comes this kind of this minor confrontation that people who are from other places believe different things than you. And we
Yes.
still have to come together as a global society and have certain universals. That's my opinion. There are certain inalienable human rights that I believe should be protected. But there are going to be stories and authors that have different points of view than me, that have different points of view than you. And we still need to be able to, this is my personal belief, we need to be able to read those stories for the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, and value those stories for what they are, even if they do disagree with certain things that we feel in our own political or moral standpoints. Because a lot of people have a lot of things to say, and I don't want to lose any of the varying ethics, the varying moralities and things like that, because I think that's one of the best ways that we can inspect various philosophies is through fiction.
Yes, definitely. And respect people. If you respect other their opinion and probably makes the world go round. Right, Miss Bernal? But
Yeah.
I want to plug in our recent fundraising, people. Book 101 Review do our fundraising for the less fortunate people. Book 101 Review Foundation is help to empower our less fortunate children because they are our future
Mm.
generation. Our generation. Let's give them a good education, nourish them, and be part of this world to be successful in their future generation. So, Miss Burnout, to see what is your advice for those aspiring writers about sci-fi fantasy?
Take risks. Create a world that's different from this one. I see a lot of manuscripts cross my desk, my professional career. I see a lot of aspiring writers who are coming into their first manuscript. They're trying to sell their first novel, that kind of thing. And I see a lot of people who, this is natural, this is just part of the human experience, but they're using their own experience in culture as the bedrock for, how they create a world. And I mean, that obviously that's going to happen. That is the way it works. But if you're just kind of taking something that's currently out there, like Vancouver, the city that I'm quite nearby, Vancouver. If I just take Vancouver in and of itself, its skyline, its people, the restaurants on Granville Street, the whole thing, Roxy Burger, all of that, it's called Moxie Burger now, and it's Vancouver, and you just change a couple letters. That's not fantasy world building. Start from the origin of all things in your universe. Start from that breath of life. Was it by chance that the universe was created? Did some minor god's child in 2 universes over end up chucking one of their marbles in a river and it happened to like explode into a brand new big bang? How did your universe start? Where does your story start? Not, what character is going to be the first person we see in this universe, but how did the universe begin? Make a risk on that. Be experimental. It might not work. You might be like, okay, this is too difficult for people to connect to. There still does need to be certain things that people can connect to and be like, okay, I get it. That reminds me of my own experience. That is part of it too. But experiment with it. Throw certain things down and see where they lead you. They might not lead you to that perfect story, but they might lead you through a little bunch of warrens into another place where you can then be like, okay, here's something where the human experience, that experience of relationships, that experience of beings relating to other beings, that's going to be familiar. Because it kind of has to be. Otherwise, you're going to lose more people than you gain, because people need something to kind of cling to that they can be like, okay, I understand a person talking to another person. Those things are familiar. The world that you create is up to you. Go to the nth. Don't look necessarily until you're, preparing for writing something for market, but don't necessarily look around to what's popular right now and go, oh, I want to do that. Take something, the big question that you have, whether it's a question in your life, a question in philosophy, whether it's, why do we see the color orange?
And blue.
What in blue? Do we see 7,000 years ago, did we see the color blue, or did we call it a wide dark sea? And there's a question on whether or not, people saw blue in the sky, or whether they saw, gray or a green color or something like that. Take a question that you want to answer and make your universe around that question. Figure it out through the act of creating this other space. And then you'll attach to something that other people can attach to, and you'll be able to really sort of always go back to that source of inspiration, to that question. Well, how do I answer it? And if the question is too easily answered, then go for a deeper one. Connect it up and go. So
Yes, people. And if you failed, try until you succeed. Don't give up.
And again, some writing is for us. Some stories that I've written and some passages of books that I've written for my own works, they're great passages. They're just for me. Or, for the people very close to me who are, helping me edit, or, are part of my sort of creative group. So some work is very personal to us, and that's not necessarily the work that we're going to share to a wider populace. Because I believe there is a difference between being a writer and being an author. And basically the difference is all authors are writers, but not all writers are looking to be a commercially viable business person putting their work out there for a massive population. That's what an author is. So yeah, it's just be aware of that too. Sometimes we write for ourselves, other times we write for others. And if you want to know more about the art of writing and how to write, hit me up at sapphirepernell.com. I do mentorships I do mentor aspiring authors, especially in the science fiction and fantasy genres. And I'd love to have a conversation with you, or you can join my Discord server, which you can get a link to on safaburnell.com as well.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Safa Bernal, because if you support her, more coaching books to come. And Miss Bernal, thank you for your time.
And thank you for your time.
Bodycon people, see you soon.